Commander Jake Morrison sat in his chair on the bridge of the spaceship Valiant. It was just another normal day in space. The stars looked the same as always through the big window. His crew was doing their usual work, checking systems and watching for any problems. Jake had been in space for 10 years now. He knew how quiet and boring space could be most of the time. Ships would fly from one planet to another. They would carry cargo or people. Sometimes they would patrol areas to make sure everything was safe. But nothing exciting ever happened. That morning changed everything. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez ran onto the bridge. Her face was white with fear. She was holding a small computer, pad in her shaking hands. Amy had worked with Jake for 3 years. He had never seen her look so scared. "Sir, we got a message," Amy said. Her voice was shaky. "But it's not from any human ship or station." Jake looked at her. "What do you mean?" "The signal came from deep space. It's not in any language we know. But there are numbers in it. Math. Problems that only smart beings could make." Jake felt his heart beat faster. Humans had been looking for other life in space for hundreds of years. They had found empty planets and dead rocks, but never another thinking species. Never aliens who could talk. "Show me," Jake said. Amy put the data pad on the table. The screen showed lines and dots and strange symbols. But between all the weird writing, Jake could see number patterns, simple math that any smart being would know. 2 + 2 = 4. The square root of 9 is 3. Things like that. "Where did this come from?" Jake asked. "Station Bravo 7 picked it up first," Amy said. "Chief Danny Wright and his team have been watching it for 6 hours. The signal is weak, but it keeps repeating." Station Bravo 7 was one of the listening posts that watched deep space. Chief Wright was a good man who had been doing this job for 15 years. If he said the signal was real, then it was real. Jake called Dr. Lisa Campbell to the bridge. Lisa was the smartest person on the ship when it came to languages. She knew 12 human languages and had studied how aliens might talk. She had always hoped that one day she would get to meet real aliens. When Lisa saw the signal, her eyes went wide. "This is incredible," she said. "Look at these patterns. They're trying to use math to talk to us. This is exactly how we thought aliens might try to make contact." Communications Officer Pete Johnson worked with Lisa to clean up the signal. They used the ship's computers to make the message clearer. As they worked, more parts of the message became clear. "It's a distress call," Lisa said after 2 hours of work. "They're asking for help." Jake felt cold. "What kind of help?" Lisa looked at her notes. "They call themselves the Keth Mari. They're being attacked by something called the Vex Thari. Their cities are being destroyed. Their people are dying. Pete had been listening to radio signals from the area where the message came from. "Sir, I'm picking up weapons fire and explosions. There's a real battle happening out there." Jake knew he had to tell his commanders right away. He sent an emergency message to Admiral Kate Sullivan. She was in charge of all the human ships in this part of space. Within an hour, she called back. "Jake, this is the most important thing that has ever happened," Admiral Sullivan said over the video link. "We're about to meet another species and they need our help." "Yes, ma'am. What are your orders?" "I'm calling all ships to gather at Point Neptune. We're going to help these Keth Mari people." The news spread quickly through the human fleet. Captain Ryan Torres of the ship Defiance was the first to volunteer. "We can't let innocent people die," he told his crew. "We have to do something." Other captains agreed. Captain Laura Davis of the Thunderbolt said her ship was ready. Commander Julie Parker of the small ship Ranger said she would come too, even though her ship was not very big. Admiral Sullivan arrived at Point Neptune with the biggest human ship, the Constitution. She brought 12 other ships with her. Jake had never seen so many human ships in one place. Dr. Janet Pierce, the fleet's head doctor, started getting ready for wounded people. She knew that if there was a battle, many people would get hurt. She set up hospitals on 3 different ships. Engineering Chief Carlos Mendez worked day and night to make sure all the ships were ready for battle. He checked engines, weapons, and shields. He wanted every ship to be as strong as possible. Navigator Sam Blake had the hardest job. He had to figure out how to get all the ships to the Kethmari homeworld. It was very far away, in a part of space where humans had never been. The journey would take 3 days at top speed. Intelligence officer Marie Kelly tried to learn more about the enemies called the Vexithari, but there was very little information. All they knew was that these aliens were destroying the Kethmari people. Lisa worked more with the Kethmari signal. She learned that their planet was called Kethmora. It was a world with blue oceans and green lands, much like Earth. The Kethmari were peaceful people who liked to trade with other worlds. They had never hurt anyone. The Vexithari had come without warning. Their big black ships had appeared in the sky one day. They started shooting at cities and space stations. The Kethmari tried to fight back, but their weapons were not strong enough. "They're destroying everything," Lisa translated from the latest message. "Our children are dying. Our cities are burning. Please, if anyone can hear this, help us." Jake felt angry. He had never met the Kethmari, but they sounded like good people. They did not deserve to die. The Vexithari sounded like bullies who hurt people for no reason. Admiral Sullivan called all the ship captains to a meeting. "We don't know much about these enemies," she said. "We don't know how strong they are, or how many ships they have. This could be very dangerous." "We still have to try," Captain Torres said. "We can't ignore people who are asking for help." "What if it's a trap?" asked Captain Davis. "What if the Vexithari are trying to trick us?" Lisa shook her head. "The mathematics in the signal are too complex, and I've been listening to their messages for hours. The fear in their voices is real. These people are really dying." Admiral Sullivan looked at each captain. "I want every person to choose freely. No one has to come. This mission could mean we never come home." Every single captain said they would come. Jake felt proud to serve with such brave people. The fleet left Point Neptune the next morning. 23 human ships jumped into hyperspace, heading toward a battle they knew nothing about. They were going to help people they had never met, fighting enemies they had never seen. As the stars stretched into lines around them, Jake wondered what they would find when they arrived. He hoped they would not be too late to save the Kethmari people. He had no idea that they were about to start the most important battle in human history. The human fleet came out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethmari system. What they saw made everyone stop talking. The beautiful star system that Lisa had described was now a place of death and fire. Commander Jake Morrison looked through the main screen of his ship. Space was full of burning metal. What used to be space stations were now twisted pieces of junk floating in the dark. Some pieces were still glowing red-hot from explosions. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez. "What happened here?" The planet below them had once been blue and green like Earth. Now it was covered in gray smoke and orange fire. Huge holes had been blown in the ground. Cities that had taken hundreds of years to build were now just piles of broken stone and melted metal. Lieutenant Commander Alex Murphy was flying a small scout ship ahead of the main fleet. His job was to look around and see what was happening. His voice came over the radio, shaking with fear. "Admiral, you need to see this. There are enemy ships everywhere. I count over 200 of them, maybe more." Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship Constitution. She had fought in many battles, but she had never seen destruction like this. The enemy ships were huge and black. They looked like giant knives floating in space. Their hulls seemed to eat light instead of reflecting it. "How big are those ships?" she asked. Alex flew closer to get a better look. "The smallest ones are twice as big as our largest ship. The biggest one is like a flying city. I've never seen anything like it." The enemy ships moved in perfect lines. They were not fighting anyone now. They were just floating above the planet, shooting down at anything that moved. Every few minutes, bright beams of energy would come from their guns and hit the ground. Each shot would destroy what was left of a city or a town. Captain Ryan Torres of the ship Defiance was watching the enemy through his telescope. "They're not just destroying things," he said. "They're being very careful about it, like they're following a plan." Tactical Officer Ben Clark was counting the enemy ships and trying to figure out how strong they were. The numbers were bad. Very bad. "Admiral, We have 23 ships. They have over 200. Their ships are bigger and have stronger weapons. If we fight them straight up, we will lose. Admiral Sullivan knew Ben was right, but she also knew they could not just leave. The Kethmari were still sending distress signals. There were still people alive down there who needed help. Captain Laura Davis of the Thunderbolt was listening to radio signals from the enemy ships. She did not understand their language, but she could hear the tone. They sounded calm and happy, like they were enjoying what they were doing. These are not soldiers fighting a war, she told the other captains. These are killers having fun. Dr. Lisa Campbell was still working to understand the alien languages. She had learned enough Kethmari to talk with some survivors. What they told her made her feel sick. A small Kethmari ship had escaped the planet and reached the human fleet. It was badly damaged and could barely fly. The captain was a being that looked somewhat like a tall, thin human with blue skin and 4 arms. He spoke through a broken translator machine. "You came," the alien captain said. His voice was full of sadness and hope. "We did not think anyone would hear our call." "We heard you," Admiral Sullivan said. "Tell us what happened here." The Kethmari, captain's name was Zathana. He had been a trader who carried goods between planets. Now he was one of the last of his people still alive. "The Vexithari came without warning," Zathana said. "We had heard stories about them from other worlds, but we thought they were just scary tales. We were wrong." Lisa worked with Zathana to understand what the Vexithari were doing. What she learned was worse than anyone had imagined. "They don't just conquer planets," she told Admiral Sullivan. "They consume them. They take everything. The people, the animals, the plants, even the metals in the ground. They turn it all into food and materials for their war machine." "Dr. Janet?" Pierce asked what happened to the people who were captured. Zathana looked down at the floor. "They are processed, turned into nutrients. The Vexithari feed on other thinking beings. They believe it makes them stronger and smarter." Everyone in the room went quiet. They had come to help in a war. Instead, they had found something much worse. This was not war. This was farming. The Vexithari raised entire planets like crops, then harvested them when they were ready. "How many worlds have they destroyed?" Jake asked. "Hundreds," Zathana said. "Maybe thousands. They have been doing this for many lifetimes. They find a peaceful world, study it, then come back with a big fleet. No one has ever been able to stop them." Intelligence Officer Marie Kelly had been studying the enemy ships through telescopes. "I can see transport ships leaving the planet," she said. "They're loaded with something, probably prisoners." Captain Torres felt his anger growing. "We have to stop this." "With what?" Captain Davis asked. "We're outnumbered 10 to 1. Their ships are stronger than ours. If we attack, they'll destroy us easily." Ben Clark had been running calculations on his computer. Even if we could destroy half their fleet, they would still have enough ships left to wipe us out. Admiral Sullivan listened to all the arguments. She knew her officers were right. A direct attack would be suicide. But she also knew they could not just leave. If they ran away, the Vexithari would finish destroying the Kethmari. Then they would probably come looking for Earth. Commander Morrison had an idea. "What if we don't fight them like they expect? What if we use different tactics?" "What do you mean?" Admiral Sullivan asked. "Look at how they move," Jake said. "Perfect formations. Careful planning. They fight like a machine. But machines can be broken if you hit them in the right place." Engineer Carlos Mendez had been studying the enemy ships. Their technology is more advanced than ours, but it's also more complex. More things that can go wrong. Dr. Pierce was thinking about what Zathana had said. They think they're the strongest beings in the galaxy. They've probably never fought anyone who could really hurt them. That could be their weakness, Marie Kelly said. They might not be ready for a real fight. Pilot Officer Tim Hayes had been flying reconnaissance missions around the enemy fleet. Their big ships stay in the center. The smaller ones patrol the edges. If we could get past the patrol ships. Admiral Sullivan looked at the tactical display. The enemy fleet looked impossible to beat. But her people were not giving up. They were looking for ways to win even when winning seemed impossible. The Vexithari have been bullying peaceful worlds for centuries, she said. They've never fought anyone who fights back hard. They don't know what humans are capable of. Captain Torres smiled. They're about to learn. Admiral Sullivan made her decision. All ships prepare for battle. We're going to show these monsters what happens when they mess with someone from Earth. The Vexithari had detected the human fleet hours ago. They were not worried. These new aliens had small ships and primitive weapons. They would be easy to destroy, just like all the others. They had no idea they were about to face the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The battle started when the sun came up over the burning planet below. The Vexithari had been watching the small human fleet for hours. They were not worried. These new aliens looked weak and primitive. Their ships were tiny compared to Vexithari, war vessels. The Vexithari commander was a being called Thakmor. He had destroyed 47 worlds in his long life. He had never lost a battle. These humans would be just another easy victory. Attack Pattern 7, Thakmor ordered his fleet. Destroy them quickly. We have work to finish on the planet. But the humans did not fight the way Thakmor expected. Captain Ryan Torres led the first attack. His ship Defiance flew straight at the enemy fleet. The Vexithari thought he would slow down and start shooting from far away. That was how all space battles worked. Ships would stay far apart and shoot energy beams at each other until one side gave up. Torres did not slow down. He made his ship go faster. Captain, we're going too fast, his navigator said. The crew can't handle this speed. Yes, we can, Torres said. His body was pressed hard into his chair. His bones felt like they might break, but he kept pushing the engines harder. The Vexithari watched in confusion as the human ship accelerated, far beyond safe limits. No species they had ever fought could survive such speeds. The forces would crush their bodies and kill them. But humans came from Earth. Earth was a world with crushing gravity, violent weather, and deadly animals. Human bodies had evolved to survive things that would kill most other beings. Torres flew, his ship between 3 enemy cruisers. The Vexithari tried to shoot him, but he was moving too fast and changing direction too quickly. Their weapons could not track him. Behind Torres came more human ships. Each one was flying in a crazy pattern that made no sense. They spun and dove and climbed in ways that should have been impossible. Pilot Officer Tim Hayes was flying a small fighter that was falling apart around him. The metal was creaking and bending. Warning lights were flashing everywhere. But Tim kept flying. On Earth, he had grown up in the mountains where the air was thin and the weather was harsh. This was nothing compared to home. Tim slipped past 3 enemy battleships by flying through their engine exhaust. The heat should have cooked him alive. The radiation should have killed him in seconds. But his ship's shields held just long enough for him to get through. The Vexithari were starting to feel worried. These humans were not following any known rules of space combat. They were doing things that seemed impossible. Then the humans started, ramming their ships into enemy vessels. Commander Julie Parker's ship Ranger had been badly damaged by enemy fire. Her engines were failing and her weapons were broken. A normal captain would have retreated or surrendered. Parker did neither. She aimed her dying ship at the biggest enemy cruiser she could see and pushed her engines to maximum power. For Earth, she said over the radio. Then her ship hit the enemy vessel at full speed. The explosion destroyed both ships. But the enemy cruiser was 10 times bigger than Parker's ship. The Vexithari could not believe that such a small vessel could destroy one of their major warships. More human ships began ramming attacks. The Vexithari had never seen anything like it. Most species valued their lives above everything else. They would not throw themselves away in suicide attacks. But humans were different. They had evolved on a world where death was always close. They had learned to accept risk and sacrifice for the greater good. Dr. Janet Pierce was working in the medical bay of Admiral Sullivan's flagship. Wounded crew members were being brought in from all over the fleet. Many had injuries that would have killed most alien species. But humans were tough. A crew member came in with 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung. On most worlds, he would have been dying. Dr. Pierce fixed him up and sent him back to his station within 2 hours. Another patient had been exposed to radiation that would have cooked most beings. But humans had evolved under a star that gave off dangerous radiation every day. They could survive levels of exposure that would kill other species. The Vexithari tried to board human ships with their soldiers. This was their favorite tactic. Their warriors were strong and well-armed. They had conquered the armies of dozens of worlds. Master Sergeant Kevin O'Brien met them at the airlock of his ship. The Vexithari soldiers were 7 feet tall with thick armor and energy weapons. They expected to easily overpower the small human soldiers. They were wrong. Kevin and his Marines had trained on Earth, where everything was trying to kill them. They had fought in deserts where the heat could cook a person. They had battled in jungles full of poisonous animals. They had survived in frozen mountains where the cold could stop a heart. The Vexithari were strong, but they had never faced anything like human Marines. Kevin's men moved faster than the aliens expected. They used their weapons in ways the Vexithari had never seen. They fought with a fury that came from growing up on the most dangerous world in the galaxy. The alien boarding parties were destroyed, completely. Not one Vexithari soldier made it past the airlocks. Commander Nick Adams was leading repair teams on damaged ships. His job was to fix engines and weapons while the battle was still going on. The work had to be done in areas with no air, high radiation, and pieces of metal flying everywhere. Most species would have given up. The conditions were too dangerous. But Nick's teams kept working. They had grown up on Earth, where the environment tried to kill them every day. This was just another day at work. They repaired ships that should have been impossible to fix. They worked in areas where other beings would have died in minutes. They kept the human fleet fighting long after it should have been defeated. The turning point came when Lieutenant Colonel Gary Stone's Marines captured an enemy command ship. The Vexithari had never lost one of their vessels to boarding action. It was supposed to be impossible. But Gary's team had done something the aliens never expected. They had used their own ship as a weapon, ramming it into the enemy vessel's docking bay. Then they had fought their way through the ship, deck by deck. The Vexithari crew could not understand how these small humans could defeat their larger, stronger warriors. They did not know that humans had evolved to be survivors. Every human carried the genes of ancestors who had lived through ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters. On the captured ship, navigator Sam Blake found something important. The enemy fleet was controlled by one massive ship at the center of their formation. All the other ships took orders from this command vessel. If we can destroy that ship, their whole fleet will fall apart, Sam told Admiral Sullivan. Admiral Sullivan looked at the tactical display. The command ship was surrounded by hundreds of enemy vessels. Getting to it would be almost impossible. But she smiled anyway. The Vexithari had made a big mistake. They thought humans would fight like every other species they had conquered. They expected the humans to be careful and cautious. They were about to learn that humans were the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. They came from a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. And they had not just survived. They had thrived. All ships, Admiral Sullivan said over the radio. Prepare for final attack. Show them what Deathworlders can do. The final battle began with a trick that would have made any human military leader proud. Commander Jake Morrison took his damaged ship Valiant and 5 other broken vessels toward the edge of the battle zone. To the Vexithari, it looked like the humans were running away in fear. Thakmore, the enemy commander, was pleased. Look how they flee, he told his officers. Send 40 ships to destroy the cowards. This was exactly what Admiral Kate Sullivan wanted. She watched from her flagship, Constitution, as nearly a quarter of the enemy fleet chased after Morrison's small group. Now the massive Vexithari command ship had fewer guards around it. While Morrison led the enemy ships away, Captain Laura Davis worked with Engineering Chief Carlos Mendez on a desperate plan. They were modifying human torpedo weapons with technology, taken from the captured Kethmari ships. The Kethmari had been peaceful traders, but they understood gravity and space better than humans did. Their technology could bend space itself, creating holes that nothing could escape from. If we can get these new torpedoes close enough to that command ship, we can tear it apart from the inside, Carlos explained to the other captains. How close? Asked Captain Ryan Torres. Very close. Someone has to fly right up to it and deliver the weapon by hand. Everyone knew what that meant. It was a suicide mission. Whoever took the torpedo to the enemy ship would not be coming back. The Vexthari command ship was called the Devourer. It was over 1 kilometer long and bristled with thousands of weapons. Its shields could stop any normal attack. Its armor was thicker than most human ships were wide. Thakmor stood on the bridge of the Devourer, watching his forces destroy the remaining human vessels. He had fought many battles, but this one was strange. The humans kept fighting even when they should have surrendered. They used tactics that made no sense. But numbers did not lie. The humans had started with 23 ships. Now they had only 8 ships left that could still fight. Soon, this annoying battle would be over. Thakmor did not know that the humans were planning their final attack. Admiral Sullivan gathered her remaining captains for one last meeting. "We have one chance," she said. "The enemy command ship controls their entire fleet. If we can destroy it, the rest of their ships will lose coordination." "How do we get through all those defenses?" asked Commander Morrison over the radio. Was still leading enemy ships in a chase through the asteroid field. "We do what we've been doing all along," Sullivan said. "We do the impossible." The plan was simple and insane. Every human ship would attack the Devourer at the same time. They would not try to stay safe. They would not worry about getting shot down. They would just fly straight at the target and hope someone could get through. Captain Torres volunteered to carry the special torpedo. His ship Defiance was badly damaged but still flying. "I'll get it there," he promised. "No," said Lieutenant Tim Hayes over the radio. "My fighter is smaller and faster. I can slip through their defenses easier." Dr. Janet Pierce had been listening to the conversation from the medical bay. "You're all heroes," she said. "Every one of you." The final attack began just as the planet's sun reached its highest point in the sky. The remaining human ships spread out in a wide line and flew toward the Devourer at maximum speed. The Vexthari were ready for them. Hundreds of enemy ships moved to block their path. Energy beams filled space like deadly rain. Human ships began exploding one by one. But the humans kept coming. Torres flew his ship Defiance through a gap between 2 enemy cruisers. His hull was melting from enemy fire, but his engines were still working. He could see the massive command ship growing larger ahead of him. Tim Hayes was right behind him in his tiny fighter. The little ship was shaking apart, but Tim held on. He had grown up flying through mountain storms on Earth. This was just like home, except with more explosions. Captain Davis brought her ship Thunderbolt in from the side. She was drawing fire away from Torres and Hayes. Enemy weapons hit her ship again and again, but she kept flying. Commander Morrison had finished his mission of leading enemy ships away. Now he was racing back to join the final attack. His ship, Valiant, was barely holding together, but he pushed the engines harder anyway. The Devourer filled the sky ahead of them. Its weapons were firing constantly, destroying everything that came near. The space around it was full of burning metal and broken ships. Torres was almost there when enemy fire hit his engines. The Defiance started spinning out of control. "I can't hold her steady," he called over the radio. "I've got it," Tim said. His fighter was so small that the enemy ships had trouble hitting it. He flew up next to the Defiance and took the special torpedo from Torres's ship. Now Tim was alone, flying toward the most heavily defended target in the galaxy. His fighter was barely bigger than a car. The enemy command ship was like a flying mountain covered in guns. But Tim was from Earth. He had learned to fly in storms that could tear apart mountains. He had survived crashes that should have killed him. He was not going to give up now. The Devourer's shields were designed to stop large weapons and big ships. They were not meant to stop something as small as Tim's fighter. He flew straight through the energy barrier like it was not even there. Now he was inside the enemy defenses. The Devourer's weapons could not fire at him without hitting their own ship. Tim flew along the massive hull, looking for the right spot to deliver his torpedo. He found it. The ship's main power core was protected by thick armor, but there was a small opening where cooling pipes came out. Tim aimed his fighter at that tiny gap. "For Earth and the Kethmari," he said over the radio. Then he fired the special torpedo and flew his fighter straight into the opening. The explosion started small, but it grew quickly. The torpedo's gravity weapon tore space apart inside the Devourer's power core. The massive ship began breaking, apart from the inside. Thakmor felt his ship shaking around him. "What is happening?" he demanded. "The power core is collapsing," his engineer reported. "The ship is being torn apart by gravitational forces." "Impossible. Nothing can penetrate our defenses." But it was not impossible for humans. They had done the impossible many times that day. The Devourer exploded in a flash of light that could be seen from the planet below. Pieces of the massive ship scattered across thousands of kilometers of space. With their command ship gone, the Vexthari fleet fell into chaos. Ships that had moved in perfect formation now flew in circles, not knowing what to do. Some tried to retreat. Others kept fighting on their own. Admiral Sullivan's Constitution was the only human ship left that could still fight properly. But she did not need to fight anymore. The remaining Vexthari ships were destroying themselves in confusion. By the end of the day, the entire Vexthari fleet was gone. 200 ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were now just floating scrap metal. The humans had won. On the planet below, the surviving Kethamari came out of their hiding places. They looked up at the sky and saw that the black ships were gone. For the first time in months, they were safe. Admiral Sullivan stood on her damaged bridge looking out at the debris field that had once been the enemy fleet. Communications Officer Pete Johnson was receiving messages from across the galaxy. Other species had detected the battle and wanted to know what had happened to the mighty Vexthari Empire. The answer was simple. They had met humanity. As the few remaining human ships began their long journey home, they carried with them Kethamari survivors and the knowledge that they had changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same. The legend of the Deathworlders had begun, and every species in the galaxy would soon know that Earth was not a world to be trifled with.